Caroline Hyde. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Trump's administration cracks down on one of Silicon Valley's beloved visa programs, the H-1B, with increased scrutiny for computer programmer applicants. Plus, visa restrictions may drive top tech talent to other countries, like India. We'll dive into how the country might reap the benefits. And Tesla stock surges to a new all-time high after the automaker's delivery figures show it's on track to meet Elon Musk's ambitious year-end goals. First to our lead, and the annual lottery process that companies use to bring foreign technology workers to the United States has opened for next year's slots. H-1B visas are commonly used by major tech companies here in Silicon Valley to help secure the best and brightest talent from around the world. But critics of the program, including President Trump, say the visas allow companies to bring in lower-paid foreign workers. In response, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services issued new guidelines late on Friday that require additional information for computer programmers applying. And last month, the Immigration Department suspended a program that fast-tracked visa processing for certain skilled applicants. Pleased to say, joining us from Palm Beach, Florida, Vivek Wadhwa, author of multiple books, most recently Driver in the Driverless Car, and also a distinguished fellow at Carnegie Mellon, Silicon Valley. He has written extensively on H-1B visas and the tech workforce, as well as diversity. Vivek, thank you very much for joining the show. And first of all, these changes that we see, some of them pretty last minute, do you feel that this is a correcting of and tightening up, perhaps, of some of the eligibility, or in fact, do you expect full-scale dismantling of the H-1B?
I don't think they've thought it out. They're doing the same stupid things they did with the Muslim ban, and now they're haphazardly last second applying it to H-1B visas. This doesn't make sense. I mean, if they're now locking out computer programmers, that means that my students at Carnegie Mellon University, my students at Stanford University can no longer get jobs here. I mean, why do we want to lose these brilliant kids? I mean, they're going to go back to their home countries, and it's going to hurt us. It's going to benefit the rest of the world.
You were just looking now that the average salary, say, for these high-demand H-1B visas was $72,000. Many have felt that maybe this is what needs to be driven up higher to ensure that this isn't about getting cheaper tech talent in, but the more educated and better tech talent into the United States. Would you agree that H-1B could be changed? How would you advocate it being changed?
The H-1B visa is a flawed visa, but the problem is the next step, the green card. Because what happens is that when people have applied for permanent resident visas, they're now stuck in this H-1B visa loop. The easiest fix to the immigration problem, this issue about declining salaries, is to untether the visa from the company. In other words, if a company hires someone on an H-1B visa and they get someone offering them a higher salary, then they can leave and continue over there. That would fix the problem in one fell swoop. Why don't we do that? See, this way there's no cheap labor anymore.
So it's more about the green card that needs to be fixed. Vivek, you've written at length, I mean, your book, The Immigrant Exodus, Why America is Losing the Global Race to Capture Entrepreneurial Talent. That was at the very heart of this, was the fact that people come to the United States, educate themselves, and then, in fact, are driven home. Is India, is China, where is benefiting, do you think, in fact, from a potential brain drain that's going on?
You know, one way of measuring this is to look at the number of unicorns, these billion-dollar companies we get excited about. Go back 15 or 20 years, the only ones that existed were in America, more or less. Now you have about 100 of them in China and India, and we have 80 or 90 in the United States. So basically, we're losing our advantage. I mean, we're losing our ability to build innovative companies because we're losing the talent. This is just a lose-lose. It's a brain-dead strategy, frankly.
I mean, have you done the research to show that those that are being built in China and India are being built by US-educated tech talent? Or is this could be just the way the developing nations go, and indeed Europe playing catch-up? They see what Silicon Valley has built and they want to do it themselves too.
No, I actually researched it. I looked at the backgrounds of the managers of these companies, and practically every company has returnees in their management teams, which means that we educated them, we trained them up, and then we told them to go bye-bye and compete with us. And they're the ones who are building these amazing companies. It would be such a loss to America. China now has more innovative technology companies than the US does. Baidu is building better AI than Apple does. Apple is copying the designs of some of the social media apps in China. They're copying the designs of phones in China. It's having to copy from China because China is innovating beyond what even Apple can do, which is Apple is considered to be our most innovative company. It has to steal from China to keep competitive. I mean, look at what happened over here. Sad.
Sad, changeable. How can we see potentially tech talent fostered within the United States for those who indeed grew up from the very beginning in the United States?
You know, us immigrants, we want to come to America. We love America. This is a place to be. So if we simply allowed people to, come here and gave them visas, they would come. And yeah, they would make Americans compete. But, as long as there isn't a salary disadvantage, competition is good for the country. The problem was when you have cheap labor, when you have indentured servitude, when people are tethered to their companies, that's when the problems occur. Fix that problem and we fix the entire range of problems.
I'm going to throw some other range of problems at you, though, because it's not, of course, cheap labour that many people feel is undone manufacturing, particularly in the United States, but many are actually saying the crux of the problem is automation. And I know this is something you've also written an awful lot about and put a lot of thought work into. What about the answers for that? What about educating to ensure that perhaps everyone can have a utopian view of the world rather than potentially a dystopian view as we go into robots taking everyone's jobs?
That's why I discuss extensively in my book, Driving the Driverless Car, that amazing things are becoming possible. Technology is allowing us to now solve the grand challenges of humanity. It's also creating these robots that can do the job of humans. So every technology has a good and a bad. But the fact is that we could benefit from this if we led the innovation and if we now started training up our workforce. So you're right that we got to train Americans in using robotics, in being able to maintain these robots, because manufacturing is coming back to the United States, except it isn't the old manufacturing which required us to assemble goods. It's highly automated robotic manufacturing, and we're creating these technologies. We should be leading in implementing them. But again, for that, you need the best and the brightest from all over the world.
You say policymakers need to listen to this, educators need to listen to this, corporate leaders need to listen to this. Are they?
Corporate leaders get it because they see the need for immigrants. They see the need for new technology. Policymakers, they're getting dumber by the day. I mean, it's sad to see what's happened to America, that it's really, the IQ level of Capitol Hill is decreasing every election, it seems. So this is a loss for the United States. The people get it. I mean, one of the problems we're creating is that there's a big gap between the haves and the have-nots. When I say haves and have-nots, I mean not only in money, but also in knowledge and education, experience, in social values. We're building two Americas here, people who are left out and who are getting angry, and people who are now participating in the innovation. Your viewers are all tech savvy. They get it. The trouble is that I'm right next to Mar-a-Lago, where you now have, this has become Trump territory and people don't want to listen. They're basically feeling left out and disenfranchised. So this is what I discuss in the book, that we need to now figure out how to equalize. We need to offer the same technologies to everyone, to educate them, inspire them, motivate them to be part of this whole thing. And then we want to make sure that we balance the dangers of technology with the good things they can do. With robots, it's good. I mean, if we had robots serving us, cleaning up after us, that's good. But when they take our jobs away, that's bad. That's the problem with every technology. This is what we have to learn.
Do you advocate things such as the universal basic income? Do you advocate taxing robots to supply a safety net for those that do not want to be retrained?
Universal basic income is a critical ingredient of the solution. Taxing robots doesn't make sense, because I could argue that my dishwasher is a robot. So you're going to tax my dishwasher? I don't think Bill Gates had thought it out when he said that. We need to have enlightened policies, and a lot of thought needs to go into it. How do we transition to it? Because the jobless future is coming. Whether we're ready for it or not, jobs are going to be eliminated. When self-driving cars work at level 5 in the next 3 or 4 years, they're going to start replacing taxi drivers, truck drivers, en masse, millions of jobs. When we have robots now doing manufacturing, we're going to lose a lot of the jobs that exist there. When we have AI now being able to do the jobs of accountants and lawyers, we're going to lose jobs over there. Doctors' jobs are going to be lost. This is happening. We probably have 10 years or so before it becomes a critical problem, but We need 10 years to get ready for this. We need to start rethinking the way our society works, our value system. We need to start rethinking it. We need to start sharing the prosperity of creating a level playing field so that everyone can participate. There's a lot to be done, and that's what I tried talking about in the book, which I hope you'll read.
Indeed, I will. Vivek, I want to ask you, dare I suggest that perhaps Silicon Valley doesn't remain the #1 place anymore, perhaps US doesn't remain the #1 place. Where do you think your students from Carnegie Mellon are looking at most actively? Is it going to be Europe that's going to be the most at the heels of the US, or is it China, is it India? Which country is thriving the most, do you think, as the US starts to lose this battle?
They're going back to their home countries. Chinese students are going back to China. As I said earlier, Baidu now has better artificial intelligence tools than Apple has. In China, they're also doing gene editing, CRISPR, Cas9. It's basically where you edit, living cells and so on. China is leading the way in that. They're publishing papers on it. They're making all sorts of advances. China, in many ways, might be ahead of the United States in that. In many other fields, in robotics, Japan is doing amazing stuff. Korea is building self-driving cars. India is now working on lunar landers. There's a company there that's now shooting to put a lunar lander on the moon. It's a small little startup company. These are the type of things companies are seeing worldwide now. Before, this was the only place where it happened. Silicon Valley for tech, and then you had Pittsburgh for robotics, and the US was the center of gravity, and then you had some sites in Europe. Now you can go almost anywhere in the world. You can go to Brazil and see the amazing stuff they're doing over there. You can go to Santiago, Chile, and see some of the water sanitation technologies they're building over there. All over the world, you've got innovation happening. We are no longer have a monopoly on it.
Dare I say, Vivek, this isn't a bad thing?
Right.
Dare I say that this is not a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing for the people of the world. And we're 5% of the world's population, so the world wins and we lose. But if you look at the rhetoric now, getting back to where we started from, you've got the US government saying, hey, by closing the doors, we're going to make America great again. No, we're not going to make America great again. We're going to make America dumber and dumber. We're going to make it a third world country by the time we're done if we don't wake up and start realizing the amazing opportunity we have and how we're losing out on every front because technology is advancing faster than we are and the world is catching up to us.
Vivek Wadhwa, this conversation could go on and on. Fantastic to have you on. Distinguished Fellow at Carnegie Mellon, Silicon Valley, and I will indeed read your book. Thank you. Now, Google is changing its ad policies again to try and end a crisis as its YouTube unit. Alphabet's main division is introducing a new system that lets outside firms verify ad quality standards. That's on its video service, and it will expand its definitions of offensive content. Now, a number of big advertisers quit spending on YouTube after ads were highlighted running alongside videos promoting hate and violence. Johnson & Johnson, one of the largest advertisers to pull spending, is now doing an about-face and reversing its position in most major markets. Coming up, shares of long-time Apple supplier Imagination Technologies had their worst day ever. That's after Apple said it will be cutting ties with the UK-based chipmaker. We dig into what's next for the company. This is Bloomberg. Now, since the US election last year, criticism over fake news has reached fever pitch. Now a new initiative is being launched to combat declining trust in the news media and advance news literacy. The $14 million program is being run by the Cooney Graduate School of Journalism and is funded by Facebook, Mozilla and Craigslist founder Craig Newmark and other academic as well as tech leaders. The group is called the News Integrity Initiative, and it plans to back applied research as well as hold meetings with industry experts. Now, the UK tech company Imagination Technologies is feeling the pain. On Monday, the chip designer announced that Apple, its biggest customer, would no longer be using its graphics technology within the next 2 years. The news sent Imagination's shares down more than 70% at one point. Apple is Imagination's largest buyer, providing just over half its revenue. Joining us now to discuss is Bloomberg Technology's Alex Webb, who covers all things Apple. And I'm looking on my Bloomberg terminal right now, Alex, at the supply chain, great little function, SPLC, of Imagination Tech. And I can see Apple Apple provided more than 50% of revenue. This is why we saw such a phenomenal move in the shares.
Yes, it's what they talk about in the US is the Walmart effect, that a Walmart contract can make or break a company. It's the same deal for a lot of people in the electronic supply chain. If you get the big contract from Apple to get into the iPhone, on one level, that's fantastic news. It's, in some ways, you could say it's made Imagination Technologies over the past decade or so. But on the flip side, the moment Apple decides to take that contract away, you're in a bit of a pickle.
So bang, your market cap falls by £500 million in one day like that, biggest move ever. But what's interesting is, as your stories have been reporting, Apple is also a loser from this because it's one of the biggest shareholders of Imagination Technology. This is a complex relationship.
I mean, Apple is a loser from this in the sense it is, I think, the third biggest shareholder in Imagination. On the flip side, $500 million for Apple, you know, on its books is very small compared to the entire size of the company. It's a $750 billion company. I think that's the current valuation. So clearly there's a bit of pain, but equally it's securing its supply chain. So if that means that then the margins that it can boost or generate from its phones are increased significantly, then that £500 million, or if it's not a $500 million that Apple might have lost, but the money that Apple would have seen in the depreciation of the stock can be made up very easily elsewhere.
And so they can start making their own chips, as have been flagged. This could end up in court even, and I think we should also remember that this isn't the only company that is so dependent on Apple.
It's kind of interesting. We saw the set two between Apple and Qualcomm recently, and we've seen a certain amount. There's a difference in the chip industry between the people who make their chips and the people who develop the technology and then license it. And one of the implications of the Imagination press release was that they expect Apple will have to license some of this technology from them. Apple has not made any comment on this. We do not know if that will be the case, but there is an interesting dichotomy here, because on the one hand, if you're making the chips and selling them, you get more revenue, but the licensing of chips is more profitable. So there's something you're going to offset here. Clearly, investors think they know which direction that's going because we've seen the reaction from the stock, but there may be a certain sort of retrenchment in terms of how that develops.
So if I'm Dialog Semiconductor, German-based chip maker who also faces similar dependency on Apple, what do you do? Is the whole point don't take that low-hanging fruit, try and diversify yourself a little bit more?
I mean, it's you take the low-hanging fruit, but you look for other trees. You know, it's diversification is the thing. This has kind of been the problem with Imagination over the past year or two, 18 months. They've been through certain trials and tribulations. They lost their founding CEO, and there was an effort then to try to pivot the company and ensure they're not as dependent upon Apple as they have been in the past. That clearly has not been successful quickly enough. They do have 3 years now to, or 18 months to 2 years, sorry, to try and find the Plan B option. As we see the shift towards augmented reality and virtual reality, these graphics processor units, these will be something which hopefully there'll be more demand for if you're an Imagination Technologies investor. But we don't yet know how well they're set up for that.
Certainly something the UK tech scene will want to resurrect itself. It's been a big pin-up. Thank you very much, of course. Another fellow Brit with me, Bloomberg Technologies' Alex Webb. Now, coming up, the entertainment industry is getting in on the VR craze. We'll take you to China, where one of the country's most famous film directors has big plans for the technology. And a feature we'd like to bring to your attention is our interactive TV function. You can find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You'll not only be able to watch us live, but also see previous interviews from our television coverage from around the globe and dive into any of the securities or Bloomberg functions we talk about. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only, though, I'm afraid. Check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg. Virtual reality is catching on in China, so much so that the country is opening its first VR theme park, spearheaded by one of its most famous movie directors. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel geared up for an exclusive first-hand experience from Beijing.
Watch your back all the time, okay?
It's virtually impossible not to see the potential of virtual reality when one's geared up like a video game goon immersed in a deep space killing spree.
It's like a combination of a movie and a game experience.
And all you're really doing is walking around a barren, foam-padded basement.
All right, this is freaky.
The So Real VR venture is co-founded by one of China's most renowned film visionaries, Zhang Yimou, who may transform some of his most iconic silver screen work into VR.
For me, as a movie director, this technology is significant. You can be very imaginative. It's not flat. You can see color in 360 degrees. You can even interact with it. It opens up a whole new world.
So Real wants to open up a whole new industry of VR theme parks around China. This 10,000 square foot venue in a Beijing shopping mall is a pilot project to a larger theme park to be built this year in Jiangxi province.
So Real wants to become the Universal Studios of China. Why Universal Studios? Because it's backed by a wealth of intellectual property.
IDC says Chinese VR unit shipments will grow six-fold this year from last, surpassing the U.S. to be the world #1 market by 2019, as many of China's smartphone makers roll out their own VR devices. But this year is pivotal. IDC says a shakeout is already happening as venture capital shifts to content providers away from the many initial equipment makers.
Wow, that is a whole nother world down the rabbit hole.
Beijing startup Leke VR doesn't want to be one of those left for dead. It's developing its own games and plans to have 10,000 VR arcades across China by year's end.
The biggest challenge is we don't have good enough content to get repeat customers. People will play our games for 10 to 20 minutes tops, but not half a day or even longer.
4-year-old Noitam, or Motion spelled backwards, says VR right now is perhaps best suited for B2B applications by companies that can afford it.
When this technology become more mature, and there are a lot of applications over there, and then people can start to do costs down, make it smaller, cheaper.
The VR industry is eager for a breakthrough, but those investors who left because of the bottlenecks will all swarm back. When everyone wants to be in VR, it'll be too late. Those who start first win.
Unless, of course, the virtual space zombies get them first.
Oh, one more, huh? Okay, bye. Boom. Dead.
Stephen Engel, Bloomberg News, Beijing.
All the fun. Now coming up, future visa restrictions could drive top tech talent to other countries, including India. And this week, we'll be digging into the country's growing tech landscape and how it could benefit from the US visa reform. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. Russian President Vladimir Putin placed flowers at a makeshift memorial to honor the victims of today's subway train explosion in St. Petersburg. Officials say an explosive device went off inside a subway train. Authorities say the blast killed at least 11 people. Warsaw prosecutors have accused Russia of contributing to the worst tragedy in modern Polish history. That's according to the AP, which says prosecutors cite new evidence from the 2010 crash that killed President Lech Kaczynski and 95 others that concluded 2 air traffic controllers and a Russian official deliberately contributed to the disaster. Search and rescue workers are trying to locate and remove bodies of people who died in Colombia's river overflow and mudslide last week. At least 43 children were among the dead. The National Disaster Management Agency says the official death toll is more than 260. Spain's foreign minister and the UK's Brexit secretary met today over simmering tensions about the future of Gibraltar. That's after Spain insisted it hold a veto over any Brexit negotiations involving the British territory. It was handed over by Spain in the early 1700s. Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon says the UK's refusal to negotiate a date for another independence referendum is untenable. She says the will of the Scottish Parliament must be respected. The UK says a referendum is not up for discussion while the Brexit process is ongoing. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Monday here in New York. Already 7:30 Tuesday morning in Sydney. I'm joined by Bloomberg's Paul Allen with a look at the markets. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Elisa. Well, normally I'd start us off in New Zealand, but daylight savings ended in this part of the world, so that market not due to open for another 30 minutes. When the ASX opens in about 2.5 hours' time, we're expecting things to be a little weaker here following the US lower. We're drifting ever steadily away from that 5,900-point barrier here on the ASX. Things to watch today. February trade balance is expected to come in stronger at $1.9 billion. That's thanks to a resurgent iron ore price gas in that month. And the Reserve Bank of Australia board meets today. All 29 economists surveyed expect the cash rate to stay on hold at 1.5%. Over in Japan, Nikkei futures looking mixed. Keep an eye on SoftBank today. It's aiming to close the first round of investments in its $100 billion vision fund that will make Masayoshi Son one of the most powerful men in tech. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hine, and back to the story of the day. The H-1B visa application process has officially opened, despite President Trump's plans to further reform a program he says undermines American workers. Joining us now from New York is Anurag Rana of Bloomberg Intelligence. And I want to dig into some of the rather hasty changes made on Friday, it would seem, trying to make it a little bit more tough to get in your computer programmers. It is entry-level computer programmers that are going to be sort of assessed that little bit more, have to vindicate their roles that much more. But are you expecting this still to be oversubscribed?
Yeah, it should be, largely because we were expecting a lot more tougher rules coming out of the new administration. Now, we haven't seen that. And, without knowing what can come in the future, I would expect a lot of technology companies will use this window to file for as many H-1s as they can.
85,000 being the cap could get even faster than the 4 days that we saw this time last year. But give us a sense of what you're expecting in terms of those tougher rules, because there's been much talk about minimum wages being risen or trying to basically put off perhaps the misuse of H-1B visa.
Yeah, I think, from all the different rules that we have seen so far, or different bills, the one about raising the minimum wage could have an impact on margins for the overall industry. Now, think about it. If you just graduated from college, would it be possible for you to get a job at a company with, if the requirement is over 100,000 or 130,000, somewhere of that amount, that would put a severe dent for any new student that is graduating right now. So that that is an issue. The other one, which we haven't heard so far, it came out a few years ago, was something called the outplacement clause that was directly targeted toward the IT outsourcing companies, which said that if you bring an employee over here to work, you can't put them at your client site. Now, we haven't seen again that that kind of language come up in any of the bills, but something like that can seriously dent the business model of the IT outsourcing companies.
It's something we'll be digging into much more with you, I'm sure. Bloomberg Intelligence's Anurag Rana, thank you very much for your expert insight there. And sticking with the H-1B visas, it was mentioned earlier that, of course, requirements for companies looking to hire foreign talent have gone largely unchanged. And while those wholesale changes may wait another year, President Trump continues to be an advocate to reform the H-1B visa program. Ultimately, the US may hurt from future restrictions, and other countries could reap the benefits. One of these countries could well be India. This week, we will be digging into the current landscape of India's tech scene. Joining us now with expert analysis, Nexus co-founder and managing director Narendra Gupta. Nexus Venture Partners has a heavy track record of investing in India. More than a decade or two that you've now been in Mumbai and Bangalore?
We have been there for more than 10 years in Bangalore and Mumbai.
What, therefore, are you expecting could happen? Are you already seeing that the tech talent, perhaps being able to come here and be educated, isn't able to remain in the country? Is India already benefiting from perhaps the brain drain that's going back to the countries from which these educated are coming from?
Yeah, India is benefiting greatly from so-called the reverse brain drain. Rather than people coming from India to the US, now we are seeing a big outflow of talent. And really the top end of the talent in many cases back to India. So it's really greatly beneficial to India to have some of those people go back.
Are they largely Indian-born who've come here to be educated? Are we even seeing US-born starting to look at other tech hubs rather than those on their own soil?
Mostly it is people who were born in India, went to school in India and the US, worked in the US for a few years, maybe for Apple or Google or some big company or maybe even a startup. And then they want to go back to India, and the opportunities there might be better for them. We don't see too many people born in the US go back to India and work there, though I think that's going to change in the next 5 or 10 years.
What about actually putting those off coming to be educated here or seek jobs at all? You yourself, I know, came over to be educated in California, Stanford and the like. You'd originally been, of course, educated over in India. Do you think this could stop people coming to the United States? Is it putting those off?
Well, I think what is stopping people from coming to the United States is two things. First is great opportunities in India after they do some schooling in India, undergraduate schooling in India. And secondly, the negative feeling that is being created about immigrants in the US. So people are saying, well, is it really worthwhile to
The
be in
PR
the
is already hurting, you think?
PR is hurting big time. And I think it's going to continue to hurt in a very major way long term.
Let's be optimistic. Let's look at the silver lining for India that these clouds of perhaps bad PR and concern about immigration here in the US have. Where are the opportunities? You've already got a multitude of portfolio companies in India. Which areas, which sectors are really being hot there?
Well, technology has been very hot in India. Technology has been, if you look at the Silicon Valley startups, about 40% of startups have Indian founders. And today, technology is global in nature. So whether you are based in Silicon Valley or you are based in Mumbai or you are based in Beijing, there really isn't much difference in what you are able to do. Today, Bill Gates could have started his company in Sao Paulo for that matter. How does it really matter? Because you are distributing globally in any case. So I think that's something we have to keep in mind in the country, that the entrepreneurs are very mobile. They can do anything anywhere. And I think that's what might hurt. So we in the US need to create a very attractive environment for startups, no matter where the people are from.
Are you starting to see perhaps the companies? I spoke with the Adobe chief executive a couple of weeks ago, and he said, we will go where the talent is. Right. Will we start to see Apple, Microsoft, more and more satellites being set up in countries such as India and China so that they can ensure they harness the right tech talent, even if they remain there?
But they are doing that already in a very major way. Adobe has a few thousand employees. Microsoft has upward of 10,000 employees. IBM has more employees in India than anywhere else except the US. And maybe that we have crossed the US number also. I think it is the right thing for companies to do. But I want the US to stay the technology leader.
Why?
Because I think we are able to carry that. There is financing here, there is an infrastructure here, there is a culture here that can promote that technology in a big way. And I think if we lose the lead, the world is going to be a loser. So it's incumbent upon us to keep US at the forefront. What's
interesting is we've seen some deep pockets from China going into Indian startups. Are you feeling the heat as a VC who's wanting to put money to work in Indian startups? Are you feeling yet more competition coming not only from US VCs, Sequoia has an arm in India, but also China?
Well, China, yes, we feel a competition from them, and competition I think is good for us. They are both our partners and our competitors. So I would say net, it is a positive. It's a positive because they can fund companies in bigger ways than we can. They can also help us understand the Chinese and the other global markets. So I would say overall, Chinese coming into India is a plus.
We'll see how the competition commences. It's been wonderful having you on. Thank you very much indeed. We hope to, of course, speak to you again. Nexus co-founder and managing director, Narendra Gupta. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Caroline.
Now, developing story, Verizon will introduce a new division called Oath this summer. This is around the same time the telecommunication giant expects to close its deal to combine with AOL's unit, Yahoo's internet assets. AOL CEO Tim Armstrong announced the news on Twitter, saying the new unit will oversee more than 20 brands reaching more than 1 billion consumers. Verizon is buying Yahoo's assets for about $4.48 billion to expand beyond a maturing wireless and landline business into mobile media and advertising ventures. Now, coming up, it was a banner quarter for Tesla. The company's market cap has now eclipsed one of the biggest American automotive institutions. The details next. This is Bloomberg. Now, Tesla stock surges to a new all-time high after reporting first quarter delivery figures that beat expectation, and it's vaulted the company past one major US automaker. Take a look inside my Bloomberg. This is BTVG hashtag number C7410. Go into your G library on the Bloomberg, type in 7410, you will find it there. Tesla's market cap, as you can now see, overtaking that of Ford. It is $48 billion or thereabouts. So clearly, this is a monumental moment for the company. David Welch is the Detroit bureau chief from Bloomberg News and joins us with more. And David, how monumental should we be looking at this? Because the Q1 deliveries, yes, they're strong. Yes, they're showing that maybe these hefty targets for the first half can be met. Is it all about optimism to do with the Model 3?
That's really what's going on here. Is the sales were good. They weren't fabulous. They were just good. And it's a sign that the brand is still strong and even the older models can sell, which bodes pretty well for the Model 3 as it's going to come out later this year. But what we really have, because we're also talking about Ford in this, there's sort of an inflection point here, which is that any reason investors can see to sell conventional auto stocks, they do. March sales were down 1.6%. Not a terrible month, especially considering last year was a record year. But there was a big sell-off, even with car dealers like AutoNation. Everybody just fled those stocks. Tesla has a pretty good quarter, and the stock goes crazy. It's worth more than Ford Motor Company, and it's closing in on General Motors.
Yeah, let's bring our viewers that chart again. Tesla's market cap in the white line, as we see on G #7410, has been rising up past $48 billion. Ford, as we see in the blue line, dipping below that 45, but it is gaining in on GM in the yellow, which is $51 billion as we speak. But what you have to remind ourselves is that Ford makes almost 100 times the amount of cars than Tesla does. Tesla pumped out about 80,000, less than 80,000 vehicles last year, whereas Ford made 6.7 million. At what point should we be wondering whether this is really vindicated?
Well, this is a stock, and we're talking about Tesla, that trades on hope. So you look at Ford, you look at GM, they're down because the market says, you know, it was as good as it's going to get a few months ago, and now we've seen the peak, and it's probably not bad from here on out, but it's not great. There's no growth. There's a bunch of hope with Tesla that the Model 3 is going to take off, that the company will get cash flow positive on an ongoing basis, that it won't need to raise cash, it will make cash, and that it will be profitable. At that point, the Model 3 is really going to be the thing that makes or breaks the company's value, I figure, because if they don't turn out the financial results after they show the growth everyone's been hoping for, then there's a big question of, okay, what were we really waiting for? Because at some point they do just become a car company that is selling automobiles, fixing and repairing them, building them, hiring many people in factories to do all of that, and they've got to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and not go to the market several times a year for money.
And exactly this worry about having to go to the market for money is perhaps why we're not seeing analysts too euphoric as we see these sorts of levels hit. I just want to bring you another chart. So it's 7430 on the G library if you're a Bloomberg user. And this really shows you that Tesla stock might be surging, analysts remaining cautious. We still have some negative sentiment out there as where Tesla's price target should be. They've got it at 298, of course, was the last price, and they feel perhaps on our average that this should be lower. When do you think analysts might start to buy what Elon Musk is putting out on Twitter, saying, look, yes, if you compare me to the past, it's absurdly overvalued. But he said on Twitter today, Elon Musk, a stock price represents risk-adjusted future cash flows. When can he invest in really take the analysts on board with that?
Well, a lot of them have been on board because they've got price targets over $300, and we're in the 290s today. So they see some upside in the stock itself, but they're going to want to see, to really be proven out on Elon's theories, some real cash flow. And Tesla has had some positive cash flow in quarters in the past, but it hasn't been ongoing, and that's why they have to keep going back to the market. The bottom line with the Model 3 is it may sell well, and it may sell at good sticker prices, and it probably will be much more than the $35,000 they're going to charge. But it has to be cash flow positive and make the company cash flow positive to justify the valuations that they're getting, and I think that's what analysts are really saying with the sort of wait-and-see attitude that they've taken with the stock.
As yet, we don't have too much guidance as to how many Model 3s Elon Musk wants to churn out over the next few years, but we know that for the first half he's targeting, 50,000, and that looks pretty much on track for the Model S and Model Xs that he has on show already.
That's right, and that's the other big question for Tesla is if they've got close to 400,000 people who've put deposits down, what does that mean in actual annual demand? And can they build it? They've never built cars in that kind of volume before. They've had some quality issues with the vehicles they've built in much lower volumes. These are all things that mass car makers do every day and are pretty good at, and Tesla still has to prove out.
Certainly does, and with analysts 8 saying buy, still 6 saying sold. We'll see how the shares waver, but certainly surpassing Ford, it was a big day. David Welsh, Detroit Bureau Chief at Bloomberg News, thank you very much for that insight. Now, still ahead, we'll dive into the world of sports betting next and the technologies that are upending the industry. This is Bloomberg. Now, the final for the NCAA men's basketball tournament is set to tip off Monday night. This wraps up the 3-week basketball extravaganza, which has become one of the hottest tickets on the US sporting calendar. And it's proven to be big business too, with major tech implications. The American Gaming Association estimates that $10.4 billion will be wagered on the event. Now, earlier I spoke to Tom Russell, he's general counsel at Genius Sports. It's a global leader in official sports data. I started by asking, well, what the success of betting on March Madness, the NCAA tournament, spells for the industry.
We're certainly interested as a company that works extensively in sports betting. I think what's interesting about the amount of money that we're seeing moving on March Madness is that it remains to be moving on unregulated markets because, just to give you some context here, betting remains unregulated in the United States outside a few examples, including Nevada. So most of the money that is being bet offshore, on offshore websites, which means that money's moving outside of the United States. And that raises a number of interesting questions, particularly for sport, because sports can't always tell where that money is being placed and how it's being placed. And that's obviously very different to the market in the United Kingdom, where sports betting is regulated and measured by the government.
When we're seeing it move offshore, a lot of it is, of course, online gaming that we're seeing. How much more predominant is the online betting scene becoming?
Well, obviously, online gambling has grown hugely in the last few years. That's partly led by the new technology that allows in-game betting, which is very big in Europe and something that we at Genius Sports work extensively in. What in-game betting does is drives a huge demand for data, and we at Genius Sports have developed an innovative data product whereby we can measure betting on sport. Of course, the only way that you can actually have very accurate betting of monitoring on sport and the amount of money that's moving on it is where you have regulation and transparency, which is something we're yet to see in the United States.
Data. The more data we have, the more computers, algorithms can be starting to play this as well. Maybe not everyone out there is a human that's placing their bets, but are we starting to see computers at work? Are we starting to see artificial intelligence play its way as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we at Genius Sports have a product where we measure what the betting markets, what we expect the betting markets to be doing in line with the algorithms that are proprietary to Genius Sports, and we measure those against, in real time, on a second-by-second basis, what the actual betting markets are doing. And what that really importantly allows sports to do is be able to see where there is unusual activity on the betting. So we can identify in real time where the betting activity is deviating from the algorithm of what we expect, and that means that sports have a very accurate view of where there may be potential issues on their betting markets. But again, obviously, as I said earlier, the challenge of that in the United States for US sports is that there isn't any regulation yet in the United States of sports betting.
Do you see any changes in the way that the US is looking to regulate this particular area, and will we see Sports Genius coming over to the US, or indeed working more rather than with the offshore betting that we see the money move towards?
Sure. I mean, we are in conversations regularly with the US sports, and I think it's something that they're looking at constantly. The NBA commissioner has recently been quoted as saying that he thought some form of betting regulation was inevitable, and other sports commissioners have also made certain pronouncements that they think that maybe the wind is changing in the United States. But this isn't something that's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, it's going to take time. But as far as we at Genius Sports are concerned, we see ourselves as an advisor to the sports industry, really, and we can take the experience that we have in Europe and in the United Kingdom with a properly regulated market, and we work with a lot of the large sports leagues in Europe as well, including the Premier League. So we can use that experience to help US sports understand how they can best benefit from a betting regulated market.
Tom, paint the picture for us of 5-10 years' time in gaming online, in sports gaming and betting in particular. How much of it will be dominated by the algorithms, the computers, the engineers who set up certain ways and means of making money, or how much will it still be the human wanting to place a bit of money to make things more exciting?
Sure. I mean, the majority of sports betting in Europe and the United Kingdom, to use the example of which we are expert, if you like, Is it still people betting as a legitimate leisure activity? It's still mostly people wanting to enjoy the experience of betting on sport, and I see that continuing in the United States as well. I mean, I think it's very hard to predict in 5 years what the technology will look like. But as far as sports are concerned, we are explaining to them that this is a potential opportunity to increase fan engagement, but vitally, it has to be for the benefit of sport. So sport has to be the centre of any regulatory solution. But it has to be betting that is done to protect the integrity of sport.
That was Junior Sports General Counsel Tom Russell. Now that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We'll continue our focus of tech investment out of India on Tuesday's show and speak with Brian Nieder, his partner at Lead Edge Capital. This is Bloomberg.